Book 1 of the Riyria Chronicles begins with an introduction, narrated here by author Michael J. Sullivan.
Hello, I'm Michael J. Sullivan. Welcome to the Riyria Chronicles. If you're new to the world of Elan, you might want to read this introduction to help determine where to start, because it might not be here. Even veterans of the Riyria Revelations might want to read this to learn a bit about how this series came into being and what to expect going forward. The Riyria Chronicles are prequels to my debut series, The Riyria Revelations, originally published by Orbit, starting with Theft of Swords and concluding with Heir of Navron. If you prefer your tales in chronological order, start with this book, as I've taken great care to keep Chronicles spoiler-free. Also, no prior knowledge of Revelations is required. I wanted to accommodate readers from both camps, chronological or order of publication. That being said, the Chronicles were actually designed to be read after the Riyria Revelations, and veteran readers will be treated to hidden surprises made possible by having the inside scoop on the entire story arc. These won't be significant plot points, just little extra bonuses for those in the know. The bottom line is that readers can begin their adventures in Elan starting with either the Crown Tower or Theft of Swords. I'd like to take just a moment to talk about the difference in structure between these two series. For those who don't know, I wrote all 6 books of the Riyria Revelations before publishing any of them. This was absolutely necessary for that particular series. While I gave each book its own conflict and resolution, there were a number of threads interwoven across the entire series. Mysteries were hinted at, geese needed chasing, and everything was built to support the grand finale, where all the secrets were, well, revealed. Because it was a first work, I could afford such luxury. After all, no one was waiting on the next installment. My approach to the Riyria Chronicles is quite different. I have no idea how many there will be, so I'm designing this as an open-ended series rather than a single tale divided into episodes. The stories are much like standalone novels with less integration from one book to another. By doing this, I'll be able to stop writing Riyria tales at any time without leaving open questions or unresolved conflicts. There are several reasons for doing this. First and foremost is because I'm incredibly protective of Riyria. I'm very proud of what I've accomplished, and we've all seen series that were once great but ended up going on longer than they should. Second, I have no idea if people will want any more stories with these characters. All told, I've written and published 8 novels, and that just might prove to be enough. So exactly what are the Riyria Chronicles? And why did I opt to write a prequel rather than a sequel? Well, many people already know that Riyria is Elvish for 2. It's also the name adopted by Hadrian Blackwater and Royce Melbourne to refer to their thieves-for-hire enterprise. Not surprisingly, then, the Riyria Chronicles will prominently feature the pair. As a carefully designed series, Revelations concludes with the end of an era, and I'm extremely pleased with how the events wrapped up. After working so hard to find the perfect ending, I was concerned that any continuation could be seen as tacked on and could have the very real possibility of destroying something I consider precious. So the obvious choice was to explore the opposite end. Chronicles is in essence the origin story of Riyria. In the opening scene of Revelations, Royce and Hadrian were already the best of friends. Having worked together for 12 years, they demonstrate a bond that endears them to many readers. What was most interesting to me, as the author, was to explore how these two very different men influenced each other, and how they came to develop the unquestioning trust that exists between them. It occurred to me that upon first meeting, they really wouldn't have liked each other, or more precisely, they would probably have hated each other. The challenge for me was to realistically show how their union came into being, and there is nothing I love more when writing than a good challenge. Some have suggested that Chronicles was created at the urging of my publisher, who wanted me to return to an established commodity. This is not so. Anyone familiar with me knows that no amount of money could entice me to write something that I'm not interested in. So if Orbit wasn't responsible for Chronicles, who was? Well, in large part it was the readers, who insisted that 685,000 words just weren't enough. It is your support that keeps food on my table and a roof over my head. In many ways, I feel like an artist of the Renaissance, and you're my patrons. But there's another person, and probably the only one who can actually make me do something. This person plotted to bring Chronicles to life. I was taken in by this mastermind, and how her devious manipulations ensnared me is a tale unto itself. It's the classic story of a husband whose wife falls for another man, a dashing and more charming gent. It sounds tragic, but this tale is a bit different because the love affair is between a real woman and a fictional man. My wife, let's call her Robin, because that's her name, has developed an infatuation for Hadrian Blackwater. I'm not sure how I feel about enabling my wife's relationship with another man, but at least I know this guy is trustworthy. After finishing the Revelation series, Robin became depressed at having to say goodbye to the world of Elan, and especially at having to bid farewell to Hadrian, until she realized I could bring both him and Royce back in the form of prequels. This revelation set in motion her diabolical plan to resurrect the pair. It started when she persuaded me to write a short story so that I would have something for readers during the transition from self to traditional publishing. Pre-order pages for Orbit's editions of Revelations had been posted, but the books were not yet released, and my earlier versions had been removed to make way. For the first time in years, I had nothing out there, and since my contract allowed me to produce non-book length works, and because short stories are, well, short, Robin asked me to create an earlier story starring Royce and Hadrian. The thing is, I'm not very good at short stories, so I decided to approach the task like a chapter, the first chapter of a novel. I went back in time and wrote a simple little tale about Royce and Hadrian meeting Viscount Albert Winslow. This would have occurred about a year after the duo first met. I published this for free under the title The Viscount and the Witch, and readers appeared to have liked it. Once I had written that story, a seed had been planted, and while I worked on other projects, it began to grow. When it became apparent that Revelations had enough momentum, I started with what would become The Rose and the Thorn. As I neared that book's end, I realized I had a problem. I couldn't publish a novel about the second year of Royce and Hadrian's relationship. What was I thinking? Going back in time begged the question, how did it all start? What good is a legend without the origin story? The more I thought about it, the more I realized I had to write how Royce and Hadrian first met. When I told my wife, she feigned support. Well, whatever you think is best, dear. After leaving the room, I heard the muffled yes, and imagined she was doing a fist pump, as if she had just scored a winning touchdown. And so, The Crown Tower was born. Having accidentally written the books spaced a year apart in Elan time, I'm now envisioning the possibility of a 12-book series, one novel for every year prior to the events in Revelations. Will those other stories be written? It's impossible to say until I see how these two books go. But as with all things writerly, I've opened the door and ideas keep walking through. For now, I'm collecting them like pretty shells while I work on other projects. And so there you have it, a happy accident born from a conniving wife's passion for a fictional man and a legion of readers who wanted to read more. If you are a veteran of the Riyria Revelations, I hope you will enjoy these books as much as you did my others. If you are new to my writing, you might just make some new friends, and if you do, there are 6 more books just waiting for you to jump into. Finally, after reading, please consider dropping me a line at michael.sullivan.dc@gmail.com to give me your impressions. It is exactly this kind of feedback that got Chronicles written in the first place. So, if you do end up wanting more, speaking up is the best way to ensure that.